Sorry about that, babe.
Another one that's been on the backlog for who knows how long. I finally succumbed to an ask to play and cover Skies of Arcadia Legends on the Nintendo GameCube. I brokered a deal with my best IRL bud, Alpha's Back 1, where he played Secret of Evermore on his Steam Deck, and I would livestream Skies of Arcadia Legends right here on YouTube. Which, by the way, if you want to watch my first ever playthrough, I'll link the playlist in the pinned comment and description below. Developed by Overworks and published by Sega, released in North America on January 27th of 2003 for the Nintendo GameCube, Skies of Arcadia Legends is an enhanced port of Skies of Arcadia, originally on the Sega Dreamcast. A quick gloss over of the new features of this port include the following: a few special rankings in the Swashbuckler rating system, some improvements in overall game presentation, frame rate and load times, the bounty system which offers up new side quests or boss battles, some new discoveries to be found on the overworld, the Moon Hamashao side quest where you could find and catch moonfish with a pretty slick first-person view. Then after finding Doc and Maria in the overworld, you're able to feed the moonfish to the pet Hamashao named Piccolo, yielding some item rewards. And the Piastol, aka Angel of Death, 4 optional boss fights. I probably butchered her name, but whatever. Now, one thing from the list that's missing is the supposed reduced encounter rate, which I'll go into a little bit later. It's also worth noting that Pintus Quest from the Dreamcast version is not present in Skies of Arcadia Legends. So with all that out of the way, let's dive into my experience and thoughts on Skies of Arcadia Legends on the Nintendo GameCube. The story. As always, I'll help set the scene, touch on a few points here and there, but otherwise I'm not going to spoil the entire plot of the game. The game opens up with a woman, who we learn is a Sylvite named Fina, sailing through the skies. Quickly on her tail is a Valuan admiral named Alfonso, love him by the way. Alfonso is successful in his capture of Fina and brings her aboard his warship. But wait, just then a blue rogue vessel arrives with grand ideas of robbing the Valuan ship, since, you know, sky pirates. Instead of merely robbing the Valuan craft, our protagonists Vice and Ica from the Blue Rogues fight their way through, chase off Alfonso, defeat a beast named Antonio, and take Fina back to their hideout at Pirate Island. From there, the story unfolds further and plenty of twists and turns arise. Skipping ahead a bit, the story and game essentially comes down to finding 6 moon crystals. Sound familiar, RPG fans? This is done in order to prevent the summoning of a powerful old world living weapon known as the Gygus. Clearly, there are many more events and details that occur before, between, and beyond what was just mentioned. Overall, I found the story of Skies of Arcadia Legends to be engaging and adequate, even if at times a bit tropey. I thoroughly enjoyed the dialogue and banter throughout the game, whether it be in the form of important conversation, or otherwise generally deemed throwaway talk from the NPCs. On the whole, it was fun, intriguing, and flowed wonderfully, not overstaying its welcome. I've seen some criticism online that the story and dialogue of Skies is too kiddie or Saturday morning cartoonish, but truthfully, some of that playful nature and banter helps make Skies what it is to me, and it was most welcomed. As discussed earlier, many dialogue strings involving Vice have choice prompts that affect your swashbuckler rating in-game, giving even more intrigue to the happenings. All in all, I enjoyed the story and dialogue in Skies of Arcadia Legends. There are many moments throughout that touch on the entire spectrum of emotions, and even social issues, and with a varied cast of characters, both good and bad, you're sure to be entertained. Graphics. Graphically, Skies of Arcadia Legends is impressive and a perfect time capsule of the era. Legends has mild improvements to the graphical and visual effects, and on the whole, Skies of Arcadia Legends has that perfect early 2000s feel, where 3D graphics started spreading its wings beyond that of the PS1 or Sega Saturn era. The character models all feel very unique, including a myriad of facial expressions during cutscenes. The towns and dungeons feel both alive and distinguished. There's plenty of vibrancy throughout, spectacular special attacks in battle, and so forth. It's also worth noting that I enjoyed the aesthetics of the menu screens, in-game map, and the minimalist feel of the battle overlays. Keeping in mind the time frame in which this came out, the year 2000 originally for the Dreamcast, with the GameCube version debuting in 2003, I find it hard-pressed to not be impressed by the graphics of Skies of Arcadia Legends, a very enjoyable and distinguishable game to the eyes. Music and sound. On the sound front, Skies of Arcadia Legends does a good job across the board. Whether it be menu confirmations and navigation, battling, or hearing Vice clink and clank his way through various dungeons, the sound design is more than adequate, albeit at times some ambient noises and hums might get a little grating. From a soundtrack standpoint, composers Yutaka Minobe and Tatsuyuki Maeda do a wonderful job of creating memorable tracks, touching on a range of emotions, but also help add to the atmosphere of the areas that you're traversing. Some of the more memorable tracks of the game that stood out to me are that of the following: Sky Pirate Hideout, groovy, upbeat, and secretive, nailing that Skies of Arcadia vibe. The battle themes are also quite enthralling, which is good because you'll be hearing them quite often. One of my favorite parts about the music and sound design is that of during the boss battles. When suffering big blows or staging epic battle-turning comebacks, the soundtrack changes on a dime to reflect said moments. Nothing gets you going more than almost slaying that boss and hearing the new triumphant tune kick in. There's also atmospheric romps such as Dungeon of the Cave, heavy and deep tunes like that of Ramirez's theme. Ina's theme is great, and my personal favorite track of the game is Theme of Reflection, which to put it bluntly sounds like a theme of reflection. You know I lap that type of stuff up. The list goes on, and this is certainly one of the better soundtracks of the era. Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows on the music and sound front for Skies of Arcadia Legends. Notice the emphasis on Legends, but we'll get to that later. Controls. Skies of Arcadia Legends is pretty turn-based RPG standard. I found the menuing in-game to be quite fluid and responsive, which is important since you spend the majority of your game doing so with battling, buying, selling, equipping, and so forth. Moving around in the overworld towns and dungeons is solid enough, albeit at times a bit clunky, especially when you're trying to manually reposition the camera to better find your way or trying to navigate through some tighter squeezes in your airship. One of the cool bits about Skies of Arcadia Legends is the first-person view button that is primarily used for you to catch moonfish, but can also be used to get a better look at certain things off in the distance, that the normal camera rotation might not be able to help you with. All in all, I don't want to overdo the control section, it is what it is. Could it have been a bit more fluid with some of the general navigation by sky and foot? Of course, but it's not bad by any means. Gameplay and fun factor. There's a whole lot of stuff to cover here, so I'll do my best to do everything as concisely as I can. First, I want to start off with the towns and dungeons. Skies of Arcadia Legends does a wonderful job of crafting unique and intriguing areas. Each area of the game has its own personality. For example, Nasrod is very different from that of Yafutoma, and both of those are very different from Sailor's Island. Nothing really feels samey in this title, and that is welcomed on my end. The same could also be said for the dungeons, for the most part. A great example of this for me is the Temple of Pyron, which was a fun pyramid-like treasure hunt littered with engaging puzzle mechanics throughout, whereas the Dark Rift dungeon later on is done solely on your airship. Some other standout dungeons to me were that of Ducat's Island, which featured a fun, albeit tropey, party split mechanic, capped off by a challenging boss. And the game also doesn't lack atmosphere in said areas. A great example of this for me was Mount Kazai in Going Underwater, reminding me of Dino Crisis 2 on a personal gaming level. Again, there's a bajillion different towns and dungeons to be explored in Skies of Arcadia Legends, and it does a wonderful job of crafting them to be fun, unique, and intriguing. Really, the only spot of the game that seemed a bit copy-pasty to me was that of the Dark Rift and the Return to the Maw of Tartus. I really enjoyed the Dark Rift as a change of pace. Conversely, the Maw of Tartus ship dungeon just felt samey and boring. Now let's touch on the combat in Skies of Arcadia Legends. The combat of the game is broken down into two different sections: normal hand-to-hand situations and ship combat, all of which are done in a turn-based RPG style. Of the two, I greatly prefer the traditional hand-to-hand combat system, but I'll save my critiques for later. Each character has their own unique battle styles. For example, Vice and Drachma will serve as your powerhouse characters, whereas Ica will likely be a mix of screen-clearing S moves, a Delta Shield Fiend, healing and buffing, and Fina, for the most part, will be a magic and item mule, at least from my experience. The battle system includes the following commands: Run, Item, Guard, Attack, S-Move, Magic, Focus, and Cruise Special. Most of which are pretty self-explanatory, but let's dive into the few that aren't. S-Move stands for Super Move. Each character has their own defined set, which are unlocked by the use of Moonberry items. These moves will be your lifeline in Skies of Arcadia Legends. Whether it's using something like Vice's Cutlass Fury to chip away at a big boss health bar, or the aforementioned screen-clearing S moves such as Ica's Lambda Burst or her Delta Shield, which puts up a magic shell around our party members to ward off annoying boss magic. Focus is another battle command that will be used quite often in order to increase your spirit points for said S moves. And later on in the game, the Cruise Special command becomes available when Vice becomes captain of his own ship, spoilers, and its use appears when your S meter is fully charged, along with a secret full party move called Prophecy, which is very important as well. One of the more unique things about the battle system revolves around your weapon/magic attribute. Throughout the game you gain different attributes such as green, red, purple, blue, yellow, and silver. all of which are tied to a specific set of spells. The more of the attribute that you use in battle, the quicker it levels up and the quicker you learn the spells. But it doesn't end just there. Enemies also have a specified weakness to certain attributes. There's a chart provided in the game's instruction manual and strategy guide that can serve as a great reference for those that have trouble remembering them, like myself. A quick example is if the enemy is of the green attribute. Red and yellow have a greater effect on said enemy, while purple and blue have less, with green and silver being more neutral. Now let's shift over to the ship battles. For the most part, the commands are relatively similar with a few slight tweaks such as crew, which can be used for certain buffs during your tussles, and S-Cannon, which fires your special cannon during certain rounds. Much like the aforementioned Cutlass Fury or Prophecy, the S-Cannon will be your heavy-hitting attack that likely tilts ship battles in your favor, whether it be from the Harpoon Cannon or the Moonstone Cannon later on. One of the major differences, however, is the battleship-style attack menu, which spells out various things. Green on the menu typically means that things are going to be status quo. Yellow means that the enemy will be at an advantage point during that round and will likely be too far out for you to attack, triggering a lost event in battle. Red means that your opponent is likely gearing up for their super mega power attack, so ideally, guarding would be the safe call there. And lastly, the C with the exclamation point means that you'll be at a critical advantage during that turn. The ship battles can get pretty granular in terms of optimization. Certain battles have some gimmicks where you might have to wait it out a bit, or you might have to approach the enemy at a certain angle, but I'll give the 1,000-foot overview as best I can. The main cannons benefit from a character's attack stat, so ideally you'd want people like Vice or Drachma manning those. The secondary cannons don't gain bonuses, to my knowledge, from crew stats, so if they are to be used, it's recommended to have the quote weaker characters fire those off. Torpedoes also work similar to secondary attacks with fixed power and accuracy, which also leads into certain secondary cannons that could fire on multiple rounds, where if you plan ahead you could string together critical hits on C turns. You want to also use general strategies in the ship battles as well. Using a spell like Incrum will increase your ship's damage output. Quicka will increase the chances of the enemy missing your ship entirely, and you'll want to make sure that you stay up on your ship's health by the use of various ship healing items or healing spells. It's also worth noting that the more crew members you gather, the more variety of attribute buffs and crew abilities that will be at your disposal. Again, this is a pretty quick down and dirty overview of the ship battles. They can get pretty granular, and if that's your cup of tea, dive deeper. And speaking of finding more crew members, this is the perfect segue into the fact that Skies of Arcadia Legends is a 100% run RPG goer's dream. There is so much optional content that can be done, and it's not just checkbox type content either, as there will be great yield from said optional content, whether it's tons of gold, experience, crew members which bring about buffs, rare drops from enemies, and even Vice's best weapon in the game. Discoveries are probably the first optional content pieces that you'll encounter while taking to the skies. Essentially, there are landmarks and things on the overworld which can be discovered. You'll know you're close by once your compass starts going haywire. Once you find said discoveries, you're able to turn them into the Sailors Guild on Sailors Island for some quick cash. The Sailors Guild also offers up informations on the landmarks so you can stay on track a little bit better while looking for your discoveries, instead of just wandering around aimlessly. The Sailors Guild also offers up a wanted list, which is Skies of Arcadia Legends exclusive. In the process of finding and defeating said wanted pirate or pirates will yield a pretty sizable bounty. Now truthfully, I only beat half of the wanted battles in the game, but this is a really cool feature right for those looking to max out their experience. Wrapping back around to the crew members, as you progress through the game you will naturally gain some crew members, but there are many others that need to be sought out and brought on board. Again, this is a feature that while playing relatively blind I missed quite a bunch, but I will call out one in particular that was pretty neat, and that of Ryukon. On the surface, his crew command will raise your ship's attack and defense for a short time, but digging deeper he's able to create Vice's best weapon in the game, but with a twist. In order to get him in the first place, you have to fell Vise the imposter to improve your Swashbuckler rating. And even then, if you don't find the 2 hidden pieces of Valurium in the Vortex area, you will not be able to craft the powerful Vorlick blade for Vice. So you can see, at times, these side quests stack up upon each other. Again, really sweet for those looking to maximize their time and experience in Skies of Arcadia Legends. Drifting away from things such as mechanics and discoverables, I want to reiterate that I enjoyed the story and dialogue of Skies of Arcadia Legends. Despite sometimes getting the rap that it's too, again, Saturday morning cartoony, there are plenty of hit you in the feels and ponder life moments. For me, this initially struck in Lower City Valua, really feeling the class separation and oppression throughout the Valuan Empire. There's also a bunch of twists and turns that occur later, but in my spirit of not wanting to spoil too much, I'll try to be as vague as possible. You'll have instances where characters question their moral standing, and even a beautiful moment of nurturing and forgiveness where things come full circle later for a certain character. I have a few more quick notes that were worth mentioning. The difficulty of Skies of Arcadia Legends is generally fair. I never felt overly punished, I never felt pressured into grinding. The truly hard stuff, for the most part, is optional, so overall I'd say the difficulty is adequate. Skies is also very generous in that the dungeons and towns feature auto-mapping, which can be toggled on and off in the bottom right portion of the screen. Furthermore, there are plenty of opportunities to save, whether it be on your ship in the overworld, in towns, right before a dungeon starts, or right before a boss. At this point you're probably saying to yourself, dang, this is a pretty good game, isn't it? Well yeah, it is. But with that being said, as always, no game is perfect, and I had some gripes with Skies of Arcadia Legends. Critiques. Mentioned before, the soundtrack and sound design of Skies of Arcadia Legends is a positive point for me. Unfortunately for Skies of Arcadia Legends, the sound quality took a major dip in its port or upgrade to the Nintendo GameCube. It's pretty much indisputable, and if you don't believe me, go compare the Dreamcast version soundtrack to the GameCube version soundtrack for yourself. You could tell pretty quickly. Another Skies of Arcadia Legends feature was that of the reduced encounter rate and better experience yields. Hate to say it, but it's not necessarily the case. In recent years, speedrunners and data miners have debunked this claim. Aside from the very first encounter of the game, the yields are exactly the same as the Dreamcast counterpart throughout your journey. Aside from, of course, Skies of Arcadia Legends specific encounters that simply do not exist in the Dreamcast version. The same could be said for the encounter rate claim. Apparently in the dungeons it's exactly the same. There's been a bit of back and forth as to whether or not the encounters on the overworld were slightly reduced, but again, it seems almost negligible. One of the biggest things here though is the fact that the Dreamcast version's load times for encounters were far longer than that of Skies of Arcadia Legends, which over time could definitely make it seem like you were spending way more time in battle because, in a sense, you are. I guess this next section for me is going to be a half critique subsection. These are things that bothered me, but not too much, and or they had in-game solutions which I eventually realized and acknowledged. At first, I really did not enjoy how long some random encounters were taking, but that changed very fast when I realized the power of both Alpha Storm and Lambda Burst from Ika's S moves. Not only that, my next critique was how our special moves took too damn long, until a fellow streamgoer, shout out to Malicious, pointed out that I could simply skip the animation with the start button. And god, that was a lifesaver. Now unfortunately, the skipping doesn't seem to apply to enemy special moves and magic spells, but hey, at least we got something, so all in all, not too bad. I also have another half critique. Exploring the overworld in your ship can be a gigantic chore. The encounter rate can be brutal out there and there's no denying it, especially if you don't know exactly where to go. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this is part of the reason why I chose not to find every discovery in the game. Frankly, I just didn't want to deal with it. But there are a few things that Skies of Arcadia Legends can give to help ease this. First is the White Map, which is an accessory that Vice can equip. It decreases the rate of random encounters and increases your chances of running to 100%. In Legends, this is obtained by feeding 10 moonfish to Maria's pet. Of course, way later on in the game, you have the ability to fly above and below the clouds due to some ship upgrades, and when in those areas, there's no encounters. So again, this is a half critique. I think if anything, I wish we could have received those ship upgrades a bit earlier. Lastly, I found that magic for the most part was sort of useless. Skies of Arcadia offers up a litany of items at affordable prices that basically do the same things that the magic spells do, but without using spirit points. You have a ton of healing, reviving, buffing, and even attacking options through the use of items. Now don't get me wrong, having a jacked out Fina using actual spells, of course they're going to do more damage and be more effective. But I was able to get through the game barely using any magic and just spamming these item usages. I think if magic wasn't tied to spirit points, it would have made a huge difference and make me personally want to explore it more. Now, up until this point, many of my critiques were nitpicky or half critiques, but I want to address the two biggest issues that I actually had with Skies of Arcadia Legends. And unfortunately for me, they both kind of fed into each other at times. I personally felt like the pacing of Skies of Arcadia Legends was all over the place. I would go through stretches of many hours that were insanely captivating, and then seemingly out of nowhere there was a shift and I was in a ho-hum snooze fest for an hour. One of the spots that sticks out to me was when Vice and crew got separated from each other and Vice ended up on Crescent Isle. I appreciate the fact that they tried something new to change the pace, but my goodness, it brought my excitement level down to 0 at the end of that particular stream. And my biggest point of contention, the ship battles. I have to be honest, they just didn't do it for me. As mentioned earlier, the ship battles can be pretty granular. Depending on who is in your crew, what you find, what you buy, and what you do on certain turns can go a long way. I can fully acknowledge that since I didn't attempt to 100% the game, that I was not humming along at optimal capacity in my ship battles. I can also acknowledge that the change of pace between party combat and ship battle combat might hit that sweet spot for a lot of people, and I always applaud when games try something different. I can further acknowledge that the scale, awe, and scope of these battles probably hit pretty hard on the Dreamcast. It's definitely a spectacle. But for me, I found these battles to be gigantic slogs. Even if I were to go through the game again with optimal strategies and preparedness in mind, chopping off a few minutes here and there won't make me think any more of them. In general, I found the ship battles to be too long, slow, and boring. And to my knowledge, you can't skip any animations of the attacks or special attacks in these battles. I tried. And if you can, I guess for some reason they changed the skip button from start, because it didn't work for me. One of my biggest issues with the ship battles are, for the most part, you're never really in any danger of losing unless you're completely out to lunch mentally, especially when you're able to stock up on ship healing items. I see a lot of ship battle defenders online, in my comments and in my streams, and honestly, that's great guys, I am really glad that you enjoyed them. But the ship battles are actually one of the biggest reasons why I had issues with Skies of Arcadia Legends pacing, especially when you would get back-to-back ship battles, or in some cases, back-to-back-to-back ship battles. Again, I know that if I did everything optimally that the battles could have been done quicker, but the fact remains that the animations are overtly long, and aside from the optimization merely speeding up the battles, I didn't find there to be much in the way of difficulty. You could simply just slog your way through almost every battle by just gearing up for your main special cannon and healing along the way. It's my personal opinion that if Skies of Arcadia ever gets a full remake, I would hope that they seriously consider turning these sections into an action RPG style. So anyways, now that I got done nitpicking and flaming certain things, where do I stand on Skies of Arcadia Legends? In summation, Skies of Arcadia Legends was a wonderful experience. It has beautiful time capsule graphics, a wonderful soundtrack, a decent story with engaging dialogue, interesting characters, an adequate challenge, all things considered, varied combat, and a great sense of wonder and exploration, ripe for those that like to 100% their RPGs. Dampened a bit by some nitpicky points regarding audio fidelity loss in this port, encounters taking a bit too long at times, and almost trivialized by items' magic system, where my major gripes came in the form of pacing issues and lack of enjoyment from ship battles. With that being said, the positives far outweigh the negatives in my eyes, and Skies of Arcadia Legends was a pleasure. I give Skies of Arcadia Legends on the Nintendo GameCube a 8.5 out of 10. If you haven't played it already, I recommend that you do so if you enjoy RPGs from this era. And if you have played it before and maybe didn't 100% the game, give it a try because there's so much to do and so much to find. If you enjoyed this review, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing if you haven't already. If you want to check out my first ever playthrough of Skies of Arcadia Legends, check out the pinned comment description below. And if you want to check out some of my other reviews, check out the pinned comment description below as well. Take care.